Who doesn't love rhythm games? I certainly do. In the 90s and noughties, this genre of gaming was the thing and got you exercising whenever you played games such as DDR or Gitadora. There are many formats of them today, though I don't have time to cover all of them. This is why I took the previous week off, so I could produce this entire episode comparing 3 separate rhythm games. The one in the background right now is not compared, but that's Guitar Hero World Tour with the Definitive Edition mod. That said, as I keep researching and you keep listening, all I care about is that you are enlightened enough to consider the software in this series. My name is Nintendo Cocules, and this is Computing Comparisons. The games I decided to compare today are Quaver from 2019, OS from 2007, though I'll be doing the Mania mode, and Eterna from 2017. These games are VSRGs, or vertically scrolling rhythm games. Let me get into that real quick before I begin today's episode. The concept of the VSRG is quite a rabbit hole, I'd say. I'll give you the gist of what it is in an American redneck manner, or at least the closest to it as possible. Let's start with what a rhythm game is. In a sense, it is a game that tests your sense of rhythm through some method of hitting buttons or keys to the timing of a song when a note reaches a receptor of some kind. It's like you're playing piano or guitar, but it's in a gamified manner and has way less notes to play on the keyboard or whatever device you're using. For example, games like Rock Band and Guitar Hero fall under what I think should be a general category of rhythm games that are not the most competitive, despite Clone Hero being pretty darn competitive. The most competitive rhythm games, I'd say, are the VSRGs. Now, think of this concept of a rhythm game as I had just described. Now, think of notes scrolling in a vertical direction, either up or down, to those receptors in which I had mentioned, timing your hits the same as before. That's basically the best I can explain for a rhythm game of this format, and it's a popular one at that. People tend to make it all the time. The 3 games I'm comparing against each other are of the VSRG category. I could not find anything defining this specific subgenre of rhythm games, so I basically had to describe it myself. I know that I will have missed something in that regard. Now, that out of the way, let's get into Quaver. This is a community-made VSRG made by Swan and his team. It is, in fact, free software, open source, under Mozilla Public License version 2, since the C# code is there on GitHub for anyone to take a look at. It is available on Steam and for Windows, Mac, and Linux. Of course, being a free software nerd, I play it on Linux. As a side note, I could not find information for it, so I'll go ahead and give you my thoughts as a 5-digit player. From the design of the game, it is nice and sleek, especially with the myriad of under-the-hood features that one could mess with in the game's settings. It is a bit extensive, as would provide such performance boosts if done well. I had even done this myself, and it isn't all that bad. However, I have to poo-poo it a bit, since the video things are kinda problematic for me. Whenever I'm playing this game, it feels like as I'm playing 60 FPS, which messes with my rhythm, and thus making me fail faster, if I fail at all, which I don't tend to. The issue I've had, however, is due to the fact that I'm using an operating system with experimental Wayland support, though I don't utilize Wayland. Basically, I'm running all 3 games you see on screen with Guitar Hero using i3 on Linux Mint, previously using Cinnamon on X11. Getting back, another nitpick I have is that the game, for whatever reason, loves when one makes a chart that is just nether fire made entirely of spaghetti noodles. These noodles are called long notes, or LN for short. The engine seems to think that LN charts are much harder, but it loves that for whatever reason. It is very hard to explain without me sounding like a complete moron. There are many types of maps in this game that are present in the other 2, like LN, scroll velocity or SV, stamina, jackhammer or just jack, chord jack, technical, stream, jump stream, and the list goes on. The best maps combine a combination of these techniques and patterns that players that are very good are very familiar with. Playing these types of games also builds pattern recognition, which is a skill that everyone should be learning. Cons out of the way, let's talk about the positives. I love that the game is free software, since in the MPL Section 3.3, there isn't one-to-one compatibility with GPL2 or later, but it is compatible. Quoting from the Free Software Foundation as follows: when you receive work under MPL 2.0, you may make a larger work that combines that work with work under those GNU licenses. When you do, Section 3.3 gives you permission to distribute the MPL-covered work under the terms of the same GNU licenses, with one condition. You must make sure that the files that were originally under the MPL are still available under the MPL's terms as well. Swan, if you're watching, maybe use AGPL3 and make the game dual licensed. And people can follow both MPL and AGPL if you think this is a good idea. If you want to keep just the standard MPL, that isn't an issue either. Another win for Quaver is that it's considered to be the most accessible rhythm game. I started with the original CISN build from 2020 when I started it in 2021. Though I had gotten to play this game and others for about 2 to 3 years at this point in time. If your equipment is optimized well for rhythm games, then it is very easy to get good accuracy scores, and I think it is very fair for the most part. However, if your equipment isn't that great, but you optimize it well enough, you should also have a good time playing it. For me, using a 1000 Hz pull rate Razer keyboard, it is not so bad. However, it does feel like I have 125 Hz, but I don't think I got the gaming mode enabled most of the time. Here, I do have it enabled since I decided to test that out. And I don't feel a difference right away. However, due to how easy it is to get set up and running without much, it is fantastic on my end. Again, it doesn't require much work, at least on Linux. Related to the second Pro, the music selection is basically like OS Direct, but for free and does not require a supporter subscription. I utilize this a lot when I get new music, but I have a ton of it already, and I use it too. For me, as one who doesn't mind trying new charts out from time to time, it's liberating when I can test a certain skill, though don't talk to me about SV, LN, or any of the Jack formats, since I'm garbage at that. I need to get better at those, and that requires a lot of stamina. However, for me personally, I don't mind that, since I like tech maps anyway, and this is a theme in this episode, where I play a few of them throughout these sections. Overall, Quaver is a fantastic game that can be played by beginners and pros alike, minus the issues I had mentioned earlier. With that, some can be quite skilled by playing it, but be skilled in other games, as I will talk about in a bit. The timing windows are decent for me, and I mostly get marvelous anyway. Add to that a good selection of music, though most of it is anime and otaku-centric, which is a theme within all these games, as most music is mostly that from the lists of songs I had seen. Quaver has the concept down, and under the hood features are solid, though it could use some Linux testers and Linux players such as myself. Maybe I could help with testing sometime? Anyway, let's get into OS. We get ourselves into the territory of OS, which was originally a rhythm game that was a clone of OS Tatakai Owendan, or in the West, Elite Beat Angels. It was written in C#, and still is that way today, but now with 2 clients and more modes. Here I'm using the Laser client to play OS Mania, whereas I use the Stable client to play OS Standard, or STD for short. There are 2 other modes, as I have mentioned, being Taiko, based upon Taiko no Tatsujin, and CTB, or Catch the Beat. I'll focus on Mania, the VSRG mode, for now. It was first debuted in October of 2012, though it was very rough initially. As time went on, however, improvements were made to Mania in the Stable client, which is freeware, and not free software. This has since been moved to Laser, which is free software under the MIT license for the framework and Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial for the assets. New features and bug fixes are being added at least once or twice a month. Anyway, OS Mania in the Laser client is much smoother for me than in Quaver, and the difficulty is challenging, but I wouldn't say it's bad compared to what Quaver has, especially with LNs. That is more or less compared to the difficulty density in Quaver going up to the 40s or even the 50s, which is ludicrous. OS uses the star rating system for difficulties instead of density in Quaver. By the way, This is the same system used in OS Standard. This is seen in all 4 modes. Eterna does have a version of Density too, I think, but it takes from DDR more closely than Quaver. I cannot mention OS without bringing up how smooth it can be if set up properly. I can get 0 milliseconds of latency since I'm on Linux and using a 1000 Hz pull rate keyboard, again, my Razer keyboard. I set it up without many issues. Your mileage may vary. Yes, for a while, I was using the source code from Privacy Files tutorial on setting up OS Laser on Ubuntu-based distributions, and I think it was a good tutorial. It may have been taken down since, however. Nowadays, I just use the officially provided app image. That should not stop me from bringing up the fact that I am able to get at least 96% on some pretty difficult songs, since I go for that as my goal. I sometimes stop short at around 95%, but I'd say it is close enough for whenever I do another attempt. I do this with all the rhythm games I play, not just OS, not even just any VSRG. And for those wondering, you can use almost any OS skin made for the stable client inside of Laser, and it will work just fine. The skin I have is the same one I used to play 8-bit Voyager with a 99.36% FC. Mind you, this video was done on hard difficulty, which is 3.04 stars. This is unlike the FC choke I would pull playing Urushi in Quaver with 98.39% accuracy. Other than that, I can conclude that OS Laser is considered, for me at least, to be the smoother game out of the 2, Quaver and OS. Don't get me wrong, Quaver has some technology under the hood going for it, but OS is a much older title, much more polished, and is well organized into what it is supposed to be in a rhythm game. Not that Quaver isn't this way. Plus, with the addition of featured artists, of which I plan to become one, the people are able to play without fears of false DMCA strikes. After all, the copyright law of 1976, Section 107, is just fine. If claimed, okay, sure, that's just the AI moderating YouTube doing some icky wikis. Or that's because of complex copyright nonsense I do not understand. That's what happened when I played Tornado by Aggressor Bronx in OS Standard using the stable client, but I was not struck for it, despite featured artist status. Anyway, let's bring us to Eterna, which I think is better than Quaver, but pales in comparison to OS. Just a tiny bit. Eterna is a fork of Stepmania designed for keyboard play. It uses some of Stepmania's code, but it was reworked to fit exclusively keyboard play, though some people may play some pad-based shenanigans in the game too. This may be an older game that people do not play that often, but I'm better at that than even OS. In my opinion, this is a game that does alright in terms of under-the-hood shenanigans, but is lacking in some areas. Let's talk about that. I will immediately start with the positives. Stepmania's calibration is similar to that of Quaver's. but I think calibration does better on this end than it does in Quaver. Once calibrated to your specs, it should be alright to play for the most part. Just make sure that you have, again, a mechanical keyboard that's got a 1000 Hz pull rate at least. That way, you'll be able to do just fine. I think this was also designed for those with a 125 Hz pull rate. But I need to do some more research on that. I think you should be alright if you have a keyboard that's got 125 Hz also. Next, I will cover the timing windows. Unlike what you see in Quaver and OS, Eterna's timing windows are similar to that of DDR. Although, these are StepMania timings. So this may take some getting used to. If you get a good or below, that breaks a combo, as you may have seen on screen. This is the same thing in Flash Revolution, or FFR for short, of which I have played too. I need to play that some more, as it's a good title without LNs. Next, song selection is alright, better than Quaver's in some aspects, as some classics can come from that specifically. In my opinion, however, I'd also mention that it's not as diverse as us, but there is still a good selection as to what it offers. It's mostly older songs from a long time ago. As an old school rhythm game player, I kinda like that. The last pro is that, again, it's free software. This time, it's under MIT license. Then again, OS Laser is also under the same license for its code, so it makes sense. In my opinion, when it comes to licenses, it should be Free Software Foundation approved, but not always is that possible. Those were the quick pros I could come up with, but I have some cons as well. The game isn't as accessible as the other two, but it's kinda good for those with a little bit of experience. For me, as a Pro-Am player, this is alright on that aspect, though beginners may have a good time understanding it too. This leads into the second con, as that is a pattern you may have seen on screen. Basically, when you have a long note and there's a regular note after the LN, it can be hard to read that and sometimes is easy to miss. This happens to me a lot too, but then again, it's me being a Pro-Am player prone to making mistakes of this nature. The third con I notice is that the game's updates are sporadic, but that is understandable given how small the dev team for Eterna is, I think. I would like to see improvements come to Eterna, but that would be quite a task to improve it all on one's own. Heck, I even posted a bug that has yet to be fixed, but some things were going on, I bet. The last con I'll have to give is with accessibility. Yes, the game is free to download, since it is hosted on GitHub. However, you need to provide the game with songs, as with StepMania, as it does not come with any, due to the way it's done inside of the game. Fortunately, there is a repository of songs available for this game, so that is a bonus. However, you can also make an account for the game to post your scores, and that's what I've done. I've gotten a decent ranking on one map, if I recall correctly. Though this is good to do, accessibility may be an issue, but that is due to how old the latest version of the game is. and I don't think it was discontinued by any stretch. As I said, updates are somewhat sporadic, so I can give the devs that. I think that about does it for Eterna. Now that we've taken a look at all 3 games, let's give some commonalities to finish off this episode. As I've stated, all 3 games are free software under different licenses for the code. It can also be noted that some aspects of the games are the same, like the calibration for Quiver and Eterna, or the scanning possibilities in all 3 games. However, I will say that using skins without knowing what it is you want could spell disaster for your play. I tend to stick to one skin for a specific game, and use a different skin for a different game. That is just me, personally speaking. I can also say that based upon the experience I had gained by playing these games, my gripes are kinda justified as a consistency player. Though, if playing tech, that is not too bad. Jacks, core jacks, and songs that are too fast are my kryptonite, in my humble opinion. But I could save that for another time. And that will wrap it up for this episode of Computing Comparisons. Thank you, and good night.